But the basic idea here is these are just two different genetic groups of sentient organisms, right? You could say humans and races, humans and ethnies, right? Theoretical non-human sentient organisms. And when I say sentient, I like high intelligence, human level intelligence, somewhere around there, right? I don't just mean, some technical definition. That could include a lot. Hey, how's it going, Mr. A? So the basic history of the world is you would have cultural inputs, you would have the local religious groups, you'd have, music, any cultural inputs, whatever you consider to be a cultural input that shapes the culture. Laws. Did you consider laws to be a cultural input? If so, here they are. And you would have a cultural input set for a genetic group, and then they would create the established culture. So this is a flow, right? Let's do line. Let's just do it in black and make it thick. So the cultural inputs get processed through the intellectual faculties, the brain morphology of this group, and then you get the cultural result, right? And then you would have a different ethne somewhere else in the world, right? And they had, they would have different cultural inputs, different part of the world, different circumstances, different music, laws, religion, whatever. And they would establish a different culture. So different input, different established culture, but also a different mechanism for translating input into output, right? So some people, like in our spheres, will recognize the difference between ethnies, but they will still understand the importance of cultural input. Like, if you had a different cultural input, right? So let's, light blue, cultural input. You had a brand new cultural input, established culture. And you said, okay, well, we're not doing this one anymore. Instead, we're going to do this, right? Well, you're not going to get this again because that doesn't make sense. You're going to get this new thing, right? This new established culture. Now, what trips some people up, in my mind, is they'll say, well, because established culture can be changed via cultural input, therefore we can all be made the same, and we can adopt a universal cultural input to get a universal established culture, and that's simply not true, right? So let's do, boom, this comes in, and then dotted line, established culture, and then let's bring it into this other group, which is using different brain morphology, right? A different genetic group, and guess what happens? A different established culture results. Which is critical. Like, you have our guys, some of them, who will start to recognize that, like, yes, we're different. But they'll see that cultural input can create established culture. They hypothesize that established cultures could theoretically converge even with our genetic differences. And somehow they actually come to the conclusion that simply with a universal cultural input, we can actually redirect everyone to be at the same ends. But that's not true, right? Imagine if you had two different machines, one that stretches metal and one that bends metal. You can give them both the same input, right? Because input does affect the output. But if you give them the same input, you'll get different outputs because those machines are genuinely different, right? So theoretically, if you wanted different genetic groups to arrive at the exact same established culture, you would need a very contrived way to determine. You'd have to, like, maybe not contrived. You'd need a very complicated way to determine what cultural inputs each group needs to actually arrive at the established culture. And guess who does that? Guess who does that? That's the people who are talking about equity, right? They're saying, hey, we need to create these systems where different groups get treated differently so that we can arrive at an equitable outcome, right? This is the let's adjust cultural input until we finally get an established culture. I mean, that's Kamala Harris, right? They'll sort of like accept the group difference genetic understanding, but then they'll be like, well, you know, all we'll have to do is all become Christians, and then we'll all be at the uniculture. And it's like, all right, bro. And similarly, I think if you look honestly at Christianity as it's expressed, like the Christianity has expanded into Korea and Africa, and I think when you look at Christian Europeans, and when you look at Christian Africans, and when you look at Christian Koreans, you will find some important differences, because Koreans can't stop being Koreans just because they become Christian. You know, Africans can't stop being Africans. You know? Europeans can't stop being Europeans. You know?